Right. Hi. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
It's us back again, but this time we are live. This is a webinar, and we are going to be talking about what we launched this week, building footprints on the LandGrid mapping platform. We're not talking so much about the data in itself, our bulk data. We're talking more in terms of what we derived and how you can view it on our platform. So we have Nick with us. Hey, Nick, how are you?
Yeah,
Long time no see.
I know.
Actually, long time no see. We are a remote team, so we don't actually see each other often at all. We have to make time for it. We may have a few live attendees, but I think we can get started on some of the basics and building the context and everything. We're going to skip our titles because mine's pretty short, but Nick's takes forever, so we don't have time
Yeah.
for
It'd be most of the clip, so we might as well skip it.
that. All right, so we had a pretty big week this week. We launched buildings data on the LangGrid platform. So basically, we've added building footprints, and we also derived and calculated two new columns and attributes, which is building count per parcel, number of buildings per parcel, and building square footage, how much of a parcel is covered by a building. And we added it both as an attribute to the LangGrid mapping platform, and you can get them as columns in bulk data as well. And this was entirely possible thanks to our partners at Gateway Spatial. They are the primary source for this data. They work just like us. They've collected this data directly from counties, and they've put together this massive data set of 104. I think it's counting. It might have reached close to 110 now, building footprints nationwide. And they provided us with this data, and then we went ahead and derived the two. Our team worked on it and derived the two brand new columns, which we've been able to add to our data set. So really a big shout out to the folks at gatewayspatial.com. If people want to go and check them out. Microsoft is not the only vendor, I guess. There are a bunch more vendors, but yes. So that because of them, this has happened on our side, and now we can actually show building footprints on as a layer, as a map layer. You can add it, and then you can see the parcel boundaries, and then you can see the tiny little building footprints right on top of it. So that's kind of what we want to demo today, and look at a bunch of different use cases and see how this can be helpful. Sounds good?
Yeah. No, I'm stoked that we have this data. I feel like it's really like a companion win to the vacancy data in a lot of ways because being able to determine what's vacant and what's not is cool, but also the natural other question that people ask is like what has structures on it to start with and what doesn't.
Yeah.
Right? And so we had a lot of people, and it's a fair question. It's also a very basic question. It's something that it's remarkably difficult to answer. So I'm stoked that we can just, it seems like a basic thing, but just being able to be like, yes, there's a building, or no, there's not a building, is really a step forward for parcel kind, as it were.
For parcel kind, yes. And it's interesting that Nick mentioned USPS too. It's because these are they work so well in tandem that they're considered premium fields in our bulk data license. So USPS and buildings are both bundled together as premium fields because they work so well together. Before we jump into demo, I think it's important to highlight some limitations and some things that people should be informed about before they actually go ahead and explore this on their own on the LangGrid platform. So like all data sets, not all data is perfect, and the same applies to the buildings data as well. So to begin with, we received about 104 to 105 million building footprints, and we have close to 143 million parcels on our site. So we don't have a 100% match between the buildings data and the parcel data, which obviously makes sense. We currently have a 69% match rate between the two data sets, which is actually not bad at all, given the large gap in the number in the actual count. Second, there will be inaccuracies because in a lot of places, especially like let's just take Detroit as an example, because that's the example we're using for a demo later as well. There are demolitions happening every day. So between data refreshes, there will be inaccuracies. So we might be showing a building on a particular parcel that might have just gotten demolished yesterday. But our partners at Gateway Spatial aim to refresh and update this data every quarter, but they work with counties directly. So when the data is refreshed, they will have it and we will be able to showcase it. But in between, there will be inaccuracies. And this is where we want to shout out to all our users and visitors. As and when you see discrepancies or inaccuracies in the data, please just write to us and we will correct it, because that's the only way we can ground truth it. Because a lot of the buildings data, a lot of people are doing aerial imagery stuff, and these are heavy undertakings. It's not something that people can do once a year. So between these data refreshes, we'd greatly appreciate any such messages, useful messages, to either help@landgrid.com or at team@landgrid.com. And then one of us will always reach back to you, and we'll be so grateful, because this will help clean up and make the data better.
Yeah. So Hannah, this is sort of like a snap question that we haven't talked about prior, but do we know, so of the properties of the mismatch, do we know that they're like spatially clustered in places? Like, for example, like there's no building data in Wyoming, or is it like we might be missing some, but across the town? Because like I'll say from my experience in like Detroit and Cleveland and Columbus, where I've looked pretty deeply, 3 cities, looks pretty good, honestly. Like,
we tried to do some spot checking last week, and Blake Gerardo, big shout out to our data manager. He's amazing. He's been testing, and we've found discrepancies to some extent almost everywhere, but we haven't seen like pockets of no data so far.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So shall we get to it? Shall we do this demo?
Yeah, let's jump right into it.
All right, cool. Let's see if this works. Okay. How's that looking, Sahana? Are we good?
It looks good. Okay. Go ahead.
All right, so I'll just choose a random neighborhood in Detroit for purposes of illustration. So there's a couple ways of sort of accessing and working with building footprints data. So the first is visual, right? So if you just want to see the building footprints themselves, you can do this under layers. You click layers, and then down is building footprints. Just like with all of our other layers, you click to turn it on, and then you click to remove it again. So we have this like very friendly hot pink color for building outlines. This looks pretty good. I think you could also layer this with satellite view, which is pretty cool. I believe the satellite view is going to be more recent in some places, at least, than the building footprint, which may or may not be useful if you're trying to get the latest. You can at least do that kind of ground truthing as well yourself. So this is how you look at the data. If you want to do any kind of analysis with the data, which I think most people who want to see this data will want to, that's used and accessed through filter. So just like we do with other attributes, in the filter tab, you can now see, for those of you who are pro users and above, the calculated building footprint and the calculated building count. So sorry, go ahead, Sally.
Do you want to like zoom in just a little bit? The fields on the filter.
Oh, I see. Let me see.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
Now you can read it better. Thank you.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, thanks for that. So just like with all other filters, basically because both of these are numbers, they get a range. So if you want to, for example, say, show me all parcels that have 2 or more buildings on them, you can do that, and it comes up. And you see here, and this probably varies, I would imagine, by geography. But so, for example, here you can see in these houses in Detroit, it's a house, and then what presumably is like a garage structure at the back that counts as 2.
Yeah.
I imagine your mileage will vary depending where you are.
Yeah.
If you want to, for example, say, show me buildings with a footprint, and remember, a footprint is not, it's just literally the area that touches the ground, and that's the calculated footprint. It is not like height of any type, and it's not the square footage of the whole house. So if you've got a 2-story house, the footprint is probably just the 500 square feet or whatever that touches the ground. So with that in mind, anyway, we can say, like, show me the buildings with footprints greater than 2,000 square feet, right? And then it comes up. So that's super nice. The other things that you can do is, so because of the way that we set up filter generally, you can layer these 2 things with other characteristics. So let's say you want to say, show me properties that have 2 buildings on them, and let's say our old friend vacancy, right, is also vacant.
There you go.
Now you have drilled down, right? So it's more than one structure on the parcel, and it's vacant. And like we do with everything else, right? Like once you filter it, you can go to list and you can look at those properties in the list. You can export them with the download CSV, do a whole bunch of stuff. So that's the basic setup there. I'm probably, Sahana, unless you feel like stopping me, I'm going to run straight into talking about a couple other use cases for this stuff, if that's cool.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. But before we get there, I do want to highlight the fact that we only show building count. We don't actually show units, number of units. So it'll actually say if it's one building on that parcel, even if it's a high rise that has, like an apartment building that has 10 other apartments in it, it doesn't show the number of units.
Right. And as basic vocabulary, I think it's worth noting, because I think, I don't know, depending on your level of use of some of these things, these terms are either second nature or can be super confusing. So buildings are like a literal structure with a roof and walls to the outside.
Yeah.
And units are dwelling units within. So an easy way to think about this is like an apartment building has multiple units. And oftentimes a good metric to think about is like, do those units have a door that locks to the outside, right? Like, is it private space? So that's like a unit. And so whether it's like a duplex or like you said, a high-rise apartment building, that's not what this is about. This is like, is there a structure on this piece of ground?
Yeah. Which the inverse of it will also tell you if it's vacant, like if it's a vacant lot, if there is a...
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's probably the next thing to hit here. So the other thing, like we had talked about a few minutes ago, one of the things that's really interesting about this is not only can you figure out where buildings are, but where they aren't. So if you're looking for vacant land, perhaps if you want to acquire vacant land, or you're looking for what properties are vacant lots, and let's say, a range of uses from I want to figure out if I can get a community garden in my neighborhood, all the way to I want to buy this corner lot to develop as townhouses, right? Like all of these things you can do if you know that there is a structure on the site or not. So here, if you put the max as 0, you get the inverse of buildings, which is no buildings. And so now you can see the vacant lots. And this is super helpful.
It is.
In a lot of cases. You can also, you can do the sort of like the multiple things here. If you want to say, show me vacant lots that are zoned for single family use and stuff like that, you can do that. But having this alone, you would be able to get a list of all the properties as well as their acreage for a given, county, municipality, or whatever. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and it's interesting to note that we actually didn't get vacant lot data from USPS vacancy data. Right. So that combined with the buildings data is how we're able to get this just vacant lots data, which is amazing, because the USPS data, we get the data from mail carriers who don't typically go to vacant lots. So that never gets recorded.
Right, exactly. So it helps to really make sure that you're looking at the right, like the statistical term would be the right universe of properties for whatever you're interested in.
That's right.
So a couple of use cases. So we talked about finding vacant lots. You can narrow down by building footprint and stuff like that, which has obvious applications. The other thing that you can do here is there's some interesting stuff that I have not made any maps of yet, but that I'm excited to dig into. One of which is calculating metrics by yourself, right? So you could look at, for example, the one that I'll cite here specifically is what percentage of a parcel is covered by a structure. Mm-hmm. And so that's interesting for real estate cases because, like, let's imagine, for example, let's say Austin, Texas, or New York City, or some other area that has like a hot real estate market. If you can find buildings that are, a small footprint on a large lot, and they're in a main commercial strip, maybe those are good properties for acquisition. Because it would be easy to buy those properties. The building is small and maybe not worth very much. And then you could use the space much more efficiently and put in a higher density project, right? So there's obvious applications to that, which are super interesting, as well as from like the analytical and I'll say like nonprofit community side. That's also an interesting stat because if you're looking at, for example, highest and best use of an area or highest and best use of a vacant lot, you can start to think about like what is the other what is the landscape around it, right? Like what are the property uses, and how might we maximize a given area of land for like the best use for the neighborhood?
Mm.
So with that said, I think that's probably the big overview I have. Sahana, did I miss anything?
No, I think we covered it all. I'm sure there are many more use cases. We'll know more as we talk to more people, and we might figure out that there might be other things that we can do with this data. But just from using the filter tool, there's a lot of deeper insight that people can get. And this is available to anyone Pro and above. So if you sign up for LandGrid Pro, you can actually see all of this data. You can filter it, you can style it. You won't be able to download it. For that, you'll have, to upgrade to either team or enterprise, much like our USPS data. But otherwise, it's available for all this analysis. Like if you want to find vacant lots, you can just do it if you sign up for Pro today.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and of course, on the other side of the scale, we can always license it in the bulk data as well. So if you want like a state's worth of vacant data, you can also do that.
Yeah. So reach out to us if you're interested. But this is just amazing. And we talked about units just a few minutes ago, but that probably is like, the next thing that we'll go after, looking for. But just in the past few months, we've been able to find the right set of data sets to integrate with, which kind of augment our already amazing parcel data. And they work very well in tandem, and they help with multiple use cases, both on the mapping front, which helps people from real estate to local governments, to land banks, to anyone who wants to license the bulk data. So there's just a lot of new attributes coming into the data, and we are working on adding nationwide zoning and use codes. That would be the next one. So,
Yep.
And I was just thinking, like, it'll be so nice when we have this combined with the LBCS codes, which will tell us whether it's a commercial building or an industrial building. But until we add that, I think, just looking at square footage, because a lot of these commercial buildings, industrial buildings, they span over a larger, parcel size.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of that could also be used to kind of get a rough sense of where some of these commercial buildings right now could be, and if they're empty.
Yeah, and especially in concert with the residential, not residential flag with USPS, right? Like you can get, it's not going to tell you industrial versus commercial, but you can at least get half the way there.
That's right. So, but we will have LBCS for most part done, at least 50% done by end of March. So we are almost getting there. So yeah, that was the buildings demo. Pretty simple, but so powerful. Just 2 attributes can tell us so much. Who knew? So that's pretty much it. We have a bunch of webinars lined up in February. We're doing one on our data. So for those of you who have questions about our data, the coverage, how many attributes we have, what our coverage looks like from county to county, nationwide, accuracy, inaccuracy, all of that will be answered by 2 of our in-house experts. And that's on February 13th. It goes live at 2:00. So, the link is on our site. The link is on our social media. I can put it up here as well. Make sure to register, because that's going to be a big, powerful one to do. And then we're doing another one with a customer who's going to do a demo on how to do surveying and how to prepare the right set of survey questions for the right set of neighborhoods. So those are the 2 upcoming webinars in February, and that's it, I guess. Right, Nick? Yeah. I think we're ready for the weekend.
I think so. I would say too, if any of you who watch this have specific ideas about either things that you'd like to see data-wise, or I guess platform-wise, or if you have ideas about specific webinars that you'd want us to do, both of those we're super open to. So just drop us a line. Team at LandGrid, help at LandGrid, Nick at LandGrid, like whatever you want.
Yeah. We are extremely accessible. We are an extremely accessible team. That's really true. And then if you're interested in data, there's parcels at LandGrid as well. We have like 50 email addresses to give out. So it shouldn't be hard to find us. All right, so that wraps it up. It wraps up the week for us as well. So please feel free to email us. And like I said, help us ground truth this data as well. So as and when you find discrepancies, inaccuracies, let us know. And if you have a big project in mind, whether it's from surveying or just doing, something related to buildings, just let us know, and I'm sure we can find a way to work with you. All right.
Have a good weekend. See you guys.
See ya. Bye.